that meeting to order, and we will take the roll and then get into our agenda. And before I even start, everybody tonight, if you speak, please use your microphone. We have a hard time hearing in the room, and we have a hard time hearing out in the public. Thank you. Rachel.
Commissioner Oliver?
Present.
Commissioner Davidson?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Boyd?
Here.
Commissioner McMurray?
Here.
Commissioner Gooch?
Here.
Chairman Dodd?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda, Vice Chair Wilson, do you have any comments on the minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have reviewed the minutes of our September meeting, and I find them to be in order. Without objection, I move for their approval.
Do I have a second? All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, we will move on to the Health Department. If the director can join us, please. And that was my bad, y'all. So I have the switch. Oh, thank you. I have the switch for that mic, so always warn me.
Thank you, sir.
So, thank you, Mr. Cumbie.
Good evening, Chairman Dodd, County Commissioners. Your health department continues to do good work for the people of Rutherford County, and we are proud to serve. You should have your September report there made available to you. Our mission statement at the Tennessee Department of Health is to protect, promote, and improve the health and prosperity of the people of Tennessee, and we feel like the best way of reinforcing that mission is to integrate it into everything we do. So as part of the report itself, you'll see columns for protect, promote, and improve, and the correlating programs we have, in those areas. Our numbers have been affected in one way or the other of late because of our pandemic response, and we're doing our best to resume our normal course of duties. One of my first priorities as director was to fill the vacancies in our department. When I came into the office, we had 0 health educators, and I'm pleased to say that we have recently filled all 3 of those positions with well-qualified people who are ready to hit the ground running. And you might ask, what does that mean to Rutherford County? Well, that means that you now have 3 professional health educators ready to do community engagement, 100% focused on community engagement. They'll be speaking to civic groups, daycares, senior centers, schools, and individuals about good health practices. And they attend fairs, festivals, community events. And so if you or your constituents see an opportunity for our health educators to engage, we would love to have you reach out to us, and we will get that happening. On a COVID update, hospitalization still trending downward, cases as well. The CDC still considers our community level rating as low. At the health department, we offer testing, free testing daily, vaccines free daily. We recently acquired, as it was approved, the pediatric dose of the Pfizer vaccine. That's the Pfizer booster. So if you have had your primary series or had 1 booster, as long as it's been 2 months since that last dose, you are eligible for that. As far as monkeypox goes, that looks like an area where our intervention has seems to be working, and cases reporting have trended down, and testing is available for that as well daily at the Rutherford County Health Department. If anyone has concerns of a rash and they just want to get it checked out, we welcome them to call us. Our disease intervention team will coordinate with them. We have monkeypox vaccines available as well, and treatment if there were to be a positive. My big announcement, and some of you have noted this with me already tonight, we have a Fight Flu event on November 9th, and that is a free flu shot day, and we invite all to come for that. From 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. we will have an express kind of going, and that is open and eligible to anyone 6 months of age or older. And after that day, on that day, and after that day, all flu shots will be free at the Rutherford County Health Department.
What day was that? Thank you.
November 9th. All right. right, that's all I have for you. I'll be glad to take any questions if anyone has any.
Yes, any questions? Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a question. I think it's wonderful that you have educators that can do some special events and training. I think it'd be helpful if the full commission might have a list of what they're prepared to do.
Great.
So that way, as we're finding out with our senior citizen centers or different places, we're like, hey, that's something we already have a training to do, and we could call and say, hey, these guys are ready to do it. I think the full commission would like to have that. So that's wonderful that you're doing that. Is that something you could do for us?
Fantastic. I'd be
Wonderful.
glad to provide you with that, provide the full commission with that, and we'll get kind of an itinerary and everything they're prepared to do, programming. We're also open to suggestions. If there is an area of interest that applies to your particular group, we can prepare something customized specifically for them.
Thank you, Chair. On the schools, what grade level, as far as materials and curriculum that you might have?
They cover it all. There's
great.
some programming we get from the state, but we start with daycares, go through Head Start, elementary, kindergarten, elementary,
Like preschool and stuff?
preschools, everything. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Trey. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a comment. I would like to thank Mr.
Mr.
Crumby for allowing myself and Commissioner James, the last meeting we attended a touring of your facility with the state commissioner,
Dr. McDonald,
and we were thoroughly impressed with the way you're operating and the knowledge of your staff, and appreciate that. And especially coming from someone as a diabetic, that your diabetes program is something that's commendable, and I appreciate you all.
Yes, sir. Thank you for mentioning that, Commissioner McMurray. And Commissioner James and Commissioner McMurray were kind enough to join us. We had our state commissioner down to tour our facilities. And since you mentioned that, I would love to extend that invitation to anyone on the Health and Ed Board or the full commission. If you are interested in a site tour, please reach out to me. We would love to do that for you, show you our services, what we do, and just continue to get the good word out there about us.
I would entertain a motion to approve Mr. Crumby's report.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Next on our agenda, we have community care. Will anyone be updating us on community care tonight? And the chairman of that board is Mayor Carr. They meet at noon one particular day of the month, the first Thursday of the month. I know some big events out there. We've continued to invest in the physical plan improvements. I know that's still underway. Also, the last I've been aware of, the number of beds that are open are very few. The financial reports have been good. There may be some red months, but it's been a black year. I've noticed a couple of reds on some monthly income and losses. But my understanding, community care is running quite well right now. Michael, any other awareness of that? That will allow us to move on to special projects.
You should have the special projects report in your packet or on the SharePoint. Nothing has really changed. We've not added any new projects. We've, of course, paid some bills in between now and the last meeting, but there's really no change in projects. We haven't added anything new. But I'll take any questions that you may have.
Okay, this special projects spreadsheet that y'all have, you may find rather cumbersome. I find it hard to put the puzzle pieces together, and I know Vice Chair Wilson has had some questions, and he and Michael were able to speak just before the meeting. And I'm under the impression that this spreadsheet is going to be revised and, dare say, simplified, and so perhaps you could speak to that a little bit.
I will be trying to revise this a little bit, make it a little easier to read. When I look at it, I have some questions. So I know if I look at it and it takes me a minute to try to understand and add some things together, I know that's difficult, on everybody else. So I'm hoping to get something together. I've shared a little bit with Vice Chair Wilson, and I think we've come up with something that'll be really easy to read. It may take me a month or two to get that together as I get my feet under me here, but I do hope to have something a little more simplified so you know exactly how much is available for each project and what your options are as the committee.
And so this fund contains those projects that we've generally bonded.
So this fund is Fund 189. It is only to contain large capital projects that we borrow money for. This fund differs from the Educational Capital Projects Fund 177, which is on the tax roll. So just a kind of distinction there. This is going to be for a new school, a big new addition. 177 is for more things like playgrounds and HVAC upgrades, stuff like that.
And so this spreadsheet will have the original budget, it'll have amendments, it'll have expenditures to date, it'll have what money's encumbered, and will then therefore show what money might be available. So sometimes we've had savings in a fund balance, and the school board's been able to shift some of that money to other capital project needs. So it's a whole lot of information and a lot of money in here, so we're not glossing it over, but it's been static for the last couple of months. A lot of us are new and getting our hands around it, including our new Director of Finance. So I think we'll have more in-depth reporting on that. And if y'all have any questions, never hesitate to ask or be prepared next month to ask. Trey?
I think it may be on your plan, it may even be here, but as far as like on a project, what percent is complete? I know you got non-obligated, not expended, maybe what percent is left over, so we can kind of see in advance, are we going to have a surplus? Are we going to fall short?
That's one of the things I want to combine. If you'll notice in that packet, one of the first pages does have a status of projects that'll have some percentages on there.
I see that.
But I think it'd be very helpful to have that all within one project so you can see, okay, I've got 400,000 left on this project. What percentage of that? Because if that's 0.001%, you can assume that project's done. But if it's $1 million project and you've got 400,000 left, okay, that project's probably not done. So I'm hoping to add all of that where when you look at that one project, it's all right there together. You can see exactly kind of where we're at, maybe list who the contractor is, all within that one segment of project. So I'm working on getting that hopefully a little more easier to read.
And, did you have a comment, Phil?
Yes, Chairman. I've seen an example of where the director's working on this with some other projects, and everyone's going to find it much easier to read because everything from the source of funding from the beginning, everything about a project is in one place versus these multiple sheets. And this is the right time to do that before we go into starting new information going on these. So anyone who wants to see that, please ask Director Smith about it. It's really, really going to be a lot easier for us to understand and find out the historical reference where we started and where we currently are.
And if we move forward with this, we'll also have access to Mr. Trey Lee and the school board. And Trey can always, I think, very quickly let us know if a project is on schedule, behind schedule, and also let us know if they need to hold funds for punch list work to be done. We never want to assume that we know the status of a job. So we'll take the direction from the school board on that as well. If there's no more comments about that, we'll move on to the next item. I don't think we need to vote anything, no report. So that takes us to the school board report. And I know we have a couple of folks here. Hello, Dr. Sullivan.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Just a couple things. First, before you have a couple of amendments, and I figured that would be the ones that we kind of start with first. That is the one that is not in your folder. The rest of it is the stuff that is in your folder that we will go over based on just kind of the way we're going to structure Health and Ed so that everyone has the same information. So is that all okay?
Yes, sir.
With you? Okay, so the first budget amendment we have is 141, General Purpose School Budget Amendment, and that is on your tab. This amendment increases budgeted Fund 141 revenue and expenditures to recognize the awarded amount of the fiscal year 22-23 Safe School Grant. This reflects the grant award that was approved by the State Department of Education. This year's grant award amount is $1,016,781. Recommended motion to amend the fiscal year 22-23 general purpose school budget to reflect the annual Safe Schools Grant Award.
I move to approve as presented.
Is there a second? I will hold up any vote. Is there any discussion or questions about this motion? Mr. Phillips?
Just one. Give us an example of what safe school expenditures would be like.
Perfect. Vigilon cameras. We have some of our Stop It app that we use, suicide prevention, when we are going to upgrade radios or any of those different types of things. I'm glad we had a little bit of discussion on this. This is one of the funds that you will not see in the future. In the TISA base, so we're going to talk about that in just a minute, Safe Schools grant actually is being removed and it is being put into the base funding that is allocated. So this will be the last year that you see the Safe Schools grant as its own separate grant. And this is basically just us accepting that money from the state.
In that grant, is there any matching funds from your board, or have we approved any matching funds?
We have other funds in a safety line, but this truly is state matched, or just state granted funds.
Mr. Phillips?
Superintendent, how many years we've been getting this grant? I can't remember.
Oh goodness, you have any idea, Brian?
Forever? A long time?
A really long time, years.
Are we where we need to be? Since this is the last time we'll have a grant, it'll roll over into something else. Are we kind of where we need to be?
No. I find it very ironic that with everything we deal with school safety, that this is one that is rolled into the base. Very ironic.
We'll touch on that comment some other time, perhaps. Hope.
I was going to touch on that
Oh,
comment.
please do touch on it now. There's a
I
lot
was just
in
going
that
to ask
comment.
you just if you could clarify your comments, because you're saying it's going to be rolled in, but will it be identifiable? Will you be able to designate or see what's actually, you will not?
Now, you'll be able to see it as far as expenditures go, what we're budgeting for. Let's say we're upgrading cameras or upgrading radios or putting extra security in a building. We're blessed in that with our county commission, the SROs are not part of our school district budget, and that is a huge blessing that I know a lot of districts don't have. That is funded by the Sheriff's Department, so we greatly appreciate that, so you won't see that aspect of it. It will be in our, what we call right now, our BEP funding per student. It'll be in the base funding per student, so it'll be that amount that we get the 20th of every single month from the State Department, whatever that magic date is, they give us the money, and it'll be allocated into this.
Is there some components of the safety program that we would need to be itemized or highlighted, perhaps?
Just, I guess, excuse me, a little challenge since safety seems to be the order of the day. Why isn't it clarified and personified, I guess, so that we know what we are doing to keep our schools, students, and staff safe?
I'm sure you can take note of that. And
I agree completely. It is very, so we have 3 state grants that are being moved into the base. One of them is Safe Schools. One of them is Coordinated School Health. So now you have safety and health that are being moved into the base, and the other one's voluntary pre-K. So those are your 3 that are being moved. Is there another one, Michael? I feel like there's an extra one.
There is one I can't think of.
can't
You will
remember.
still see, so all of that's going to be cost-centered and by location code. So you will still, citizens or this commission or this committee will still be able to see what is spent on safety, what is spent on health. All of that is still the same, and it'll still be broken down by school if you really want to. That is all still required to be submitted to the State Department of Education by location, by category. So that does not change. Essentially what they're doing is they're lumping this Safe Schools grant is now an unrestricted funding. So there's nothing that stops the school board from still allocating part of that base to safety if they want to. But it now becomes unrestricted base funding per student, per child.
That other one is Family Resource Center. And so that is one we don't have as a school district, and so that's not applicable to us. Thank you, Brian. Nice save.
Ms. Oliver, any other questions? We have a motion and a second for to accept the grant money and put it into the fund as recommended. So we will call the roll.
Commissioner Davidson?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd?
Yes.
Commissioner McMurray?
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch?
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver?
Aye.
Chairman Dodd?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, the second amendment you have before you, this amendment is to fund 7 additional English as a second language teaching positions in order to bring Rutherford County Schools in compliance with the state of Tennessee ESL requirements. The Tennessee Department of Education requires a staffing ratio of 35:1 for ESL students, and RCS is not meeting this ratio in relation to the total amount of ESL students to teachers. This funding is derived by decreasing general purpose Fund 141 unassigned fund balance and increasing salary and benefit expenditure line items in the 71-100 function. The total amount of this funding is $478,768.
Would you read the recommended motion, please?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Recommended motion to approve the GPS fund budget amendment of $478,768 of both unassigned fund balance and expenditures as presented in detail.
Any questions or discussion on this? Mr. Gooch?
This is not a major question, and I support this, but was this something that's coming out of unassigned fund balance? Was it something that was missed during the regular budget, or?
No, sir. We actually asked for, in our original budget proposal at the local level, we asked for 22 to 23 ESL positions. At our local level in our own school system, we only approved 16. So that never came before the full commission. That was internally cut. We are out of compliance, and every single year we have, it's called a LEA, a Local Education Agency Compliance Report, that is due November 11th. And for several years, and just speaking transparently, we have checked the box to say that we are in compliance with our ESL ratios. We are not in compliance with our ESL ratios.
This gets us compliant.
I am not positive that we will fill these 7 positions. ESL shortages are real. They are very hard to fill. And so the other portion of this is we have grown so much with our student enrollment. Our BEP growth money will cover this and more.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other comments?
Question.
Ms. Oliver?
Where are the shortages? When you talk about ESL shortages, where is the impact?
Yeah, so our biggest impact is on the north end of the county. That's where our biggest English as a second language classrooms are. However, we even this past year, Walter Hill had their first ESL full growth position. They have had a part-time position, and so it's in all areas of the county. Stewart's Creek is actually growing, one of our biggest areas with our English as a second language population. The north end has more, but it is definitely moving. Where we are going to struggle, and another example of that is from from John Coleman Elementary, which is very high poverty English as a second language. We're actually moving one to Blackman Elementary next week, an internal transfer, because it's not just our very north end of the county that is seeing this growth. The areas of a shortage is because if you are a 3rd grade math teacher, you have to go and get an additional endorsement to have English as a second language to be able to teach that class. And so we don't necessarily have enough people with that endorsement to be able to teach.
And even to bring up, just as an example, Smyrna High School, I believe we were all told that around 900 ESL students current enrollment, and I believe 37 different languages to have to deal with in that, just to say that, right, we need to get these filled quickly, and we have a growing issue. We're going to probably need more just from our student growth. In the north end of the county, at the moment, does seem to have the biggest part of that growth initially. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And currently this funding is coming out of fund balance, and it will be on the budget next year. In this case, funding 7 new teachers in perpetuity, so we will be seeing it again. We've had the motion read and some discussion. We can certainly have more discussion, but do I have any thought on the motion?
I move we accept the amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion on this topic? Mr. Phillips?
Just one. I remember in years past, and I can't remember how many years, everything to me is 10, 15, 20 years, you know, it's been a good while. But we were trying our best to not only English as a second language to the students, but to get some guidance with the families themselves. Are there still attempts to do that?
There are. We still have adult education programs as well that's run through our ESL department. Where we have struggled probably the most is that where we used to only have a handful of languages, we're in the hundreds of languages and dialects now that we're, and that communication barrier is real. Well, we can say that it's not, but it's a true communication barrier that we're having to use whether it is technology or some other type of platform to be able to communicate it, it's a barrier for us and really for our families.
I know it's a situation that's really hard to put your hands around, to hug, if I'm not mistaken, but it is more successful from what I remember us talking about if the families involved instead of just the students involved, and long-term implications to benefit the community would benefit in that as well. Is there any way to tell how successful we're being in that project, or is there any way to get feedback as to how we're proceeding and how successful we are?
Yeah, so just a couple things. One, I would want to get with our ESL coordinator and see what is our true outreach and what impact have we had community-wise. We have our Strife program that works at the Weary House in Laverne, and that's usually where we house a lot of it, to where our adults. The other part in our school board and the commission approved last year, we had a family, I'm trying to remember the exact wording, family engagement facilitator with our ESL department, and that has been part of what their mission has been, is to try to make sure that we're increasing this. Honestly, what a lot of their time is spent doing, though, is translating for families, because we are growing so quickly. We haven't been able to have the impact as much as we need.
Parent-teachers meetings, those type of things would greatly benefit from...
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any other discussion before we go to a vote? So we have a motion and a second, and we will be on the board.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Boyd,
Yes.
Commissioner McMurray,
Yes.
Commissioner Gooch,
Yes.
Commissioner Oliver,
Aye.
Commissioner Davidson,
Yes.
Chairman Dodd.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All
Please
right.
continue, Mr. Sullivan, Dr. Sullivan, excuse me.
Thank you. So now what I would ask that we do, there's a couple things I just wanted to give you some updates of where we are as part of our school board report. So if you would open that manila folder, there's a couple things I just wanted to bring kind of your attention to. The first thing is just our overall kind of structure and mission statement as a school district. And so our school board had a very successful retreat on October 13th and 14th. And so really what we were charged with doing is updating our strategic plan, making sure we are mission, vision aligned, and then truly having 3 to 5 goals as a district that everything we do is aligned to. And I feel like it is important for Health and Ed budget and the full commission to know what our goals are, what our mission, what our vision. So you'll see as part of our mission, really what your mission is that is what you're doing every single day. So for us as a mission, investing in our students for tomorrow's opportunities, for possibilities. And we capitalized our because that gives us, there are all of our students. As a county, there are kids. And so that's not just an investment in finance, that's an investment in what we do to make sure kids are ready academically, socially, all those different aspects. The vision is then when you're talking about what does the future look like, how will we know that we're meeting our mission statement? So the vision is that future, what's it look like? We want to make sure that we have a collaborative culture, that we have successful students, we have empowered educators, and what was huge for us is making sure that we have proactive planning. And that's where as a district that you're going to see a whole lot more, and in collaboration making sure that we have that proactive planning piece. We may not have all the answers, we may have to have some tough conversations, but we have to plan for the future. We have a couple goals, 5 of them, and you'll see our 5 goals: provide early interventions that address student needs and support the whole child. Second, recruit, retain, and support highly effective employees for our growing and diverse student population. Third, increase achievement for all students by providing a high quality and equitable education. 4, create efficient operations that optimize the investment in our students. And then last, ensure all facilities provide a safe and equitable space for our district to learn and grow. And that is where we debated having an additional one to discuss growth, needs, all that. But in talking about our facilities, I felt like that was a good place for that to land. So that's just an overview of kind of where we are as a district. This will be before our board to officially adopt at our November 3rd meeting, but this is kind of our draft for right now. The second thing that you have is an overall enrollment. I've said that we would give this to you at every Health and Ed, and I'll alternate between giving you a demographic profile, which breaks it down by male, female, our different races, ethnicities, special education, and if you're going across, free and reduced lunch. You see ESL, I want to highlight that. So that ESL, English as a second language, is truly students who, as in the education field, are still not language proficient. And so these are students who are receiving direct English as a second language services, and you will see that 5,204. So 10% of our student enrollment is receiving direct English as a second language enrollment services. There's another aspect of that that's not included in this number, and that is our students who met English language proficiency in the state of Tennessee over the last 4 years. So if a student passes, that doesn't mean they're completely fluent. That means they have progressed to at least have academic language to be successful. And we track those students. They're called T1s, T2s, T3s, and T4s, Transition 1, Transition 2, Transition 3, Transition 4. All that stands for is how many years ago did they meet that Tennessee required test. So a T4 means they passed it 4 years ago. And at that aspect, you're looking at about another 2,500 to 2,600 kids. And so our overall student population with ESL is somewhere between 12 and 13%. And so it is a very high population of our students. The other part of that, if you look at special education, so that is 5,589. And so you are looking at 20% of our students just right off the bat are in a at-risk subgroup before we even get to talking about demographics. Next, you have free and reduced lunch, 19,179. So we are now at 30,000 roughly of our 50,000 students are either economically disadvantaged, students with disability, English as a second language. Now, you very well could have students who are in multiple categories here, so that number is probably a little high. But what I find ironic, even though I'm telling you this data, we are still considered the 13th or 14th, depending on which state data you're looking at, wealthiest district in the state of Tennessee. And so I think we lose sight of that sometimes. We are considered the 13th or 14th wealthiest as far as what our median income is. And so I think that's amazing. What I wanted to call to your attention, this number is 51,080. When I share with you the one I believe you got last time that shows by grade level where we are, that number is going to be a little bit less than this number. This number includes 3 different areas because this is truly the number of kids we serve. We have, and I'll just give you these numbers, we have some pre-K programs. We serve 262 3-year-olds in our county. We serve 577 4-year-olds. And then we have 104 super seniors, and a super senior is a student who has disabilities, but their parent has allowed them to stay in our care federally. They can stay when they're 18 to 22, even though they've graduated, and we have 104 of those students district-wide. And so that's where your discrepancy comes from. If you look at our overall K-12 enrollment, we're about 50,000, 150, 160, and if you look at this puts it at 51,000 instead of the 50,000, those extra students. And so and I'll share that every time, the difference between those 2 reports. But I at least wanted you to see kind of where our enrollment breakdown is. We're in the middle of a salary study, and something that came out in our salary study that is mind-blowing to me, that has nothing to do with salary, is that we are in the top 100 districts as far as size in the United States of America. I never would have envisioned Rutherford County being in the top 100. And so what my challenge and our challenge is that when we are looking at comparable districts in the top 100, there were a lot of those school districts that I think any of us don't want us to be like. There were a lot of districts that as we were looking through, I was like, I don't want to be like them, I don't want to be like them, I don't want to be like them. And so our challenge is, yes, we're big. How do we stay successful and also fiscally conservative and being responsible for not only our education, but also our tax base as well? And so I thought that was ironic that we were between the 92nd and 96th. I'll kind of stop right there before we get into TISA. Any questions on that?
Any questions on enrollment? And it will be a monthly topic as well. And I'm sure, by all means, contemplate this list and have questions for next month. If there aren't any questions on the enrollment, we will move on to your next.
The other portion of that, and I should have mentioned this, with enrollment, our school board just had on October 11th and 12th, we reviewed every single school's capacity, their enrollment, and every single school board zone to see just to give an overview. If you want to go back and watch that, on October 11th, we discussed every elementary school, and October 12th, we discussed every middle and high school, and we went through every school zone, every enrollment capacity, everything. So that's just some good information to see. Next, I was asked, and something I feel like it's good for us just to norm set pretty quickly, about TISA, which is our new funding formula. And we are not going to go through this entire packet of information, but there are some things I wanted to highlight and those requested so we could all kind of get on the same page. And so if you will, just flip with me kind of to the first page. You will see the development of the bill, just so we can norm set. Governor Lee announced a review of the Basic Education Program, or BEP. We are still operating in BEP right now. That's why we talked about BEP growth funds. Yes, we're in the middle of this process, but there's an important date that's coming up later this week that I'll talk about in a second. So if you flip over to the second page, I know several of you may have seen this before. This just gives you a timeline of kind of where we've been as far as funding for public education goes in the state of Tennessee. And so it goes from the BEP being created in '92 to our new formula that is about to be implemented later and moving into next year. The third page talks about the public comments. So over the last year, there were thousands of public comments. As you keep going to the fourth page, this all happened last winter, spring, and then part of the summer. There were 18 funding review subcommittees set up by the governor and several departments. That got us to February 2022, if you flip on to the next one, of where the General Assembly began and actually ultimately approved to fund TISA and to look into TISA. So if you will flip to the next one, this is kind of where we are right now. We are all the way at number 5, but it clearly doesn't go into all the steps. So yes, the bill has become law, but we are still very much in it is not, all the details are not final yet. There is actually a State Board of Education meeting, I believe on Friday, that discusses and hopefully approves the rules of TISA. So when you hear people talk about the details of TISA, our new funding formula, but then there's not a lot of information shared by the department yet, it's because they're not official. The State Board of Education still has to pass this on Friday at their second reading. They passed the first one in August. The second one is going to be hopefully on Friday. Then the Department of Education has been charged with creating a TISA guide, and that is hopefully going to be to us in January or February. And hearing to them, I doubt it is going to be January or February. March, April, which is a challenge for us because we are way into and past part of our budget season by that point. That is a challenge, but that's outside of our control, so we're going to have to look at the things we can do, get the best information we can, and go by all the rules and the guides that we have at that time. Directors of schools have mentioned that to the State Department and General Assembly multiple times, but it is a process that's outlined in law of the steps it has to take. If you will go on to the flip over to the formula breakdown, it's about 3 pages from that. And we're going to spend just a little bit of time kind of talking about the formula breakdown. Flipping over to the next page, you will see that in 2024, there will be $9 billion that is allocated for education. $1 billion of that is in new recurring state funds. $750 million of that was this current school year. So part of that went into different raises that they put in, even to fund the BEP a little bit differently, and also into a one-time grant for career and technical education that we're still working on some details through. If you'll flip over to the next one, it's a pyramid, and we'll go over this is the basis of TISA. So your basis of TISA is that every student earns a base by being enrolled in a public school. So that base is the same amount for every student in the state of Tennessee. And so that is with the biggest portion of your overall TISA funding. The next section you see is you have individual weights. So we talked about English as a second language, and we'll look at these weights here in just a minute. If you are a student in a specific subgroup, economically disadvantaged, students with disability and different option codes that they're now calling unique learning needs, English as a second language, all those different things, you earn extra funding based on the situation that you're in. We then have direct funding, and so a direct funding example would be making sure that our students are getting close to third grade reading. And so if you have students in kindergarten through third grade, you're going to receive some direct funding for those. And then you have outcome funding. If you have a third grade student that meets grade level proficiency, you will get an additional amount for those students. And so we're going to take our projections based on where our students did last year, because that's the best information we can go off of, because part of that direct funding is truly going to depend on how our students perform on their test in May, and we won't have the results back until the budget's already been passed. And so there is a little bit of a moving target here when you're talking about direct funding and looking at some of those things. So if you'll flip over to the next page, the overview of the base funding. The only one that I wanted to kind of highlight is the very last one, and this comes from the Department of Education. It empowers Tennessee to recruit and do things a little bit differently with salaries. That's part of why we're looking at a salary study. Our district continues to grow so big that we are not in the shape that we can just depend on local universities to produce enough teachers for us to fill our classrooms. Our school board and the commission has done a fabulous job. We are not in the shape, and I mentioned this last time, that some other school districts are as far as having opening classrooms. We do have open classrooms, but the largest majority of those are being staffed by current teachers who are then taking an extra class and teaching during their planning period. That is going to burn our teachers out pretty quickly, and it's something I'm terrified of. And if knowing that we are going to continue to add students every single year, we have to be aggressive in looking at what we're doing with salaries to make sure that we are recruiting teachers and support staff, or otherwise we will be like some of these big metropolitan districts that it's typical for them to have 400 and 500 openings in a year. We won't be successful under that model, no matter how great our teachers and students are. And so that was one point of the base. You can kind of see where they're looking at. If you go over to the next one, the weight funding, just like we talked about, you get different weights based on if you're economically disadvantaged, if you have those unique learning needs like students with disabilities, with multiple learning needs, English as a second language. Charter school facilities are outlined here as well. If you go to the next page, we're going to skip over this one because there's a separate sheet we'll get to in a minute that talks about looking at those unique learning needs. If you'll go to the overview of direct funding, this talks about just some of those specific funds that will go to districts to make sure they're meeting targets. You'll see there's $145 million that is earmarked for K through third grade literacy. A lot of that's going to form in, hopefully, in the section of tutoring, making sure we continue our power hour, our summer programs, all those different types of things, and enhancing the ability to meet students where they are. If you'll flip over to the next one, this gives you an example of breaking down direct funding. So you'll see kindergarten through third gets an additional 500 students according to this. Literacy tutoring to students who need more help. These would be students who it's gotten a lot of attention on third grade retention. If a student is not on grade level, they can still move on to fourth grade if their parents agree to do either summer school or tutoring or both, depending on how their performance is. And then the last one that we're going to look at is an overview of outcomes funding. This awards you based on how students perform. And so if students meet third grade reading proficiency, you'll get an extra outcome bonus. If you have students who aren't at third grade reading, but they improve enough, you could get that funding in fourth grade. If you have students who improve on the ACT, for example, then originally, and this is just a point of contention that school districts and school directors had, it was written originally if a student improved 3 points, then you would get extra funding. The Tennessee Department of Education increased that to 4 points. And so that hurts a school district funding-wise, because to move 4 points before your senior year is a pretty big jump for high school students. The other aspect, if you are industry certifications or IB diplomas, you get extra funding as well. But at the high school level, you can only receive funding for one of those. And so if you have a student who is ACT 22 and they get an industry certification, they're only going to get funding for one of those items, and not necessarily all of them like they would if they were in a different situation. And so just wanted to go over, we're not going to look at the examples. There's a ton of examples back through there that breaks down the bill, but I wanted to, if you will if you will look at it says unique learning needs crosswalk. This gives you an idea of what unique learning needs and what that weight is going to be. So these are our students. So you have the base, that amount that every kid's going to get. And then let's just say ULN 1. For us right now, that is special education option 1. So these students are getting the least amount of services. They would get an extra 15% of that base to go. And it goes all the way down to your most at-need students, so option 10, or ULN 10, I'm used to calling them options. ULN 10, Unique Learning Needs 10, they're going to receive $150,000 of that base, and that would be whether they're in residential services, hospital, or homebound. That is great to have that funding there. It is better than what it is right now. But if you were looking at a student that is in this type of situation, that is still not going to cover, and the local picks up the difference in that. Because we have students that we spend much, much more on to make sure that we educate in their least restrictive environment than what 150% of that would cost. And then the last thing, there's a couple different examples of where on the back of English language learners, again, you will see what they talk about T1s through T4s here. The next one is your outcome, and it gets pretty specific on talking about, instead of just individual amounts, how much more a student can earn based on where they land, whether or not they're economically disadvantaged, English is a second language, or you'll see that under that category it says ACT score of 21, underlined, or industry certification. So this is, again, not giving necessarily a financial incentive to our students or the highest performers. They can only hit one category, not both. So that was kind of one of those areas. I did want to highlight, and I missed it, and I apologize, and then I'll go for questions because I'm sure we'll have questions. If you will go back to the very large document, and probably 8 or 9 pages from the back, it says other education funding fast growing. And that is my error. I should have called that out earlier. Other education funding fast growing. Is right before bill breakdown, and then there's 1 page in front of that, it's 2 after that. So very close to the back, 8 or 9 pages from the back. It says other education funding fast growing. It looks like this, other education, yep, looks like this, other education funding and fast growing.
It's after the examples. That's how I
Yes,
had to
right
see
after
it,
the
Ms.
examples.
Oliver.
Thank you.
When I saw the examples, I found it.
Yep, very directly, thank you, Commissioner Dodd, directly after example high school students. That next. Yep, you were good. All right, so something I wanted to call out, and this is not necessarily where we have seen anything, but fast-growing student stipend. LEAs with current year growth above 2% from the prior year will receive the same year funding for the additional students, and so that would help us so that we're not waiting a year in the rears. And so if you'll notice, that is from the previous year, and so that is in every single year. We largely hit that 2% growth, and I know that is hard to think about, but when we are at 50,000 students, and we grow 2%, we're only talking about adding 1,000 kids. And so I know that's kind of been our magic number, is we're growing 1,000 kids. Unfortunately, the last 2 years, it's been way more than 1,000 kids, and that trend is continuing, so we will be in line for that. The next one's the one that I called everybody's attention to, that in our General Assembly is very much, our local delegation is involved on this, but it's one that I want us to continue to be on the forefront. Fast-growing infrastructure stipend. And so this is an LEAs with 2% growth, which again, we would qualify, but the point of contingent is each year for 3 consecutive years. Right now, no district in Tennessee qualifies because of the COVID year. And so I don't believe that was in the intent of the legislators to make it that no district, maybe it was, I hope it's not, to make it so that no district got this for the first couple years. And so we have asked our local delegation to please advocate on our behalf. They've told us they will go to bat and get that fixed, but it's one to keep on the forefront because 2% extra growth is a game changer for us as a school district to be able to strictly just put that to infrastructure. So that takes some of that off the local tax base and some of the pressure off of us as well. So I wanted to kind of highlight that. Questions? I was going to say concerns about TISA, but we'll leave that out. But questions or comments?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Just for those who may be watching, can you just explain what LEA stands for?
Yeah, LEA is your local education agency, and so that is basically our school district. There are 95 counties in the state of Tennessee, but there are 146 LEAs. Like the Rutherford County has Rutherford County and Murfreesboro City. Great question.
Question. As it relates to the various student populations, where does assessment fall in when you talk about unique learning needs? Is funding available for the assessment, or is that something you're supposed to already have done before putting them in these categories?
So that is actually already funded. Laura, we have as part of our budget a huge assessment portion in our general purpose, and then for students who are actually already identified, we have an additional federal dollar as well that goes through that. So that would just be an allocation that's part of the base right now that we use as part of BEP. We would continue to fund those. It brings up a good point of, will these funds get directly to the school? At some point, I would like to see us get more towards school-based budgeting. We are nowhere near that yet, not even close to where that needs to be yet. Our principals don't have that capacity. We as a district don't have the capacity to understand TISA yet. There's still too many unknowns. The other part of that I struggle with is equity. Just based on zoning or our enrollment, our magnet schools do an amazing job. And let's just take we'll take McFadden, for example. McFadden usually is 99, 100% proficient because they are a magnet school. They should be 99 or 100% proficient. According to TISA, they're going to earn an extra $500 per student because of the student enrollment they have. To where a school like Roy Waldron, who we are hoping is going to have a ton of growth because their students come with different challenges, may not earn that allocation. So in that type of situation, your schools that old saying, the rich get richer, that's exactly what would happen. So we have to make sure that we control for some of those things, and I don't have all the answers for that. That's a lot of conversation that we have to have.
Thank you, guys, and don't hesitate to use this information for questions in the future. I think that the board would be willing to receive some questions via email, or perhaps we try to think of a way to consolidate our questions and get them out in some standardized method. But by all means, it's a lot to take in, and
it is. Yes.
We will. I think Dr. Sullivan and his board will be available to us.
And we're still learning it as well. I mean, it changes anytime you have a directors of schools meeting with all directors, things change.
Thank you for that information. What other items do you have on your agenda?
Two quick items. So we will talk about, one, I give everybody an update on charter schools. Of course, American Classical removed their application, and so that is not an option for this coming school year. Rutherford Collegiate Prep, the one that the commission approved last year, we heard on Friday that they are looking to delay yet another school year, and then we are working with Springs Charter, trying to find them a location. That's the one that our board approved. But just like we struggle with on a daily basis, they are struggling to find land or a building to be able to use. And so just wanted to give that update of, we have one that potentially could open next year, Springs Charter, but they are struggling just like we do to find a location. And so just wanted to bring that up, and I imagine that'll probably be part of the conversation. We are about to start a brand new process. So charter schools are kind of like a year-long process. Any charter that is interested in applying to Rutherford County, we actually are submitting, it's called an RFP, even though we're not really getting anything financially from it. We have submitted to the State Department that we are looking for schools that could possibly partner with us, that could work with our English as a second language, with students with disabilities, potentially with behavioral needs. If there's I don't know that there's a charter that's out there that does that, but those are areas specifically that we are looking for support with. And so charters have until December 3rd, I believe, to be able to send us a letter of intent, and then they have until February 1st to be able to submit their application. And so we're just finished this process, but we're about to start it all over for the next cycle. So, and then the last thing I wanted to go over was the building plan. We had some questions about our additions, and I also want to just kind of give an overview of kind of where we are, and just kind of to set the tone of where we're going. I don't think any of us have a perfect solution for growth. We are looking at rezoning, something that I am and our school board is going to debate on, talk about at our work session, but also on November 3rd. We have some schools that are overcrowded that no matter if we approved a brand new building tomorrow, we're still going to struggle with what to do with students, and our students have to have a safe place to learn. And so even though it's not popular, I don't love it. In fact, I hate it, but it is much better than not having a place. On our board agenda is asking to go and purchase portables. Again, I don't love that, but we have to have room for our kids to be able to learn. The other portion of that is, even though that funding hasn't been discussed and won't be discussed probably for a while, we have in our building program extra funds for design to look at Stewart's Creek Elementary, and then also at Blackman Elementary, additional classrooms at Stewart's Creek Elementary, and then Blackman Elementary, a potential addition. We're going to look internally to see, and looking at our overall building plan, where do we have funds internally? All of those conversations around the building plan, then that connects us to the next topic, is our 3 high school additions. And really the 5, but the 3 that are on the target right now. You have a copy of an email I sent to the board earlier today as soon as I got it, and I wanted you guys to have this as well. So I was asked to kind of get a timeline of where we are and get some updates on what we are looking at. And I know many of us have kind of inherited this situation. Some of you were on the commission, but some of us inherited this, so I'm still learning this process as well. But this comes from our architect, and if you flip over to the back, you will kind of see, and to say that, you know, I've got to talk about what is the kickoff meeting, because some of this has been much more in line than, let's say, Smyrna High School, September 28th. But there are plans for all of our schools. There have been plans for all of our schools for many, many, many months. Our principals have met with Trey in our department and talked about what changes and additions. We've made some additions, the auditoriums, for example, to Riverdale and to Oakland, that changes our plans. Our fire marshal has changed our plans to some degree. And so this is the last set of drawings, and you can kind of see what we are looking at issuing for bid opening, going down through all of those, Smyrna, Riverdale, Oakland. I know the question has been, when do we go to bond market? What are our other needs as a district? And I know there's conversations that we need to have sooner rather than later. We as a board are going to have a special called meeting November 8th that we'll announce to them tomorrow. It's November 8th, isn't it, Tammy? Is that right? I think so. November 8th, we are going to have a special call meeting to look at overall what is a building plan look like, but just as importantly, what are the buildings that we need that may need renovations? Where are our priorities as a district? Because outside of, I think, all of you that have been here and then just watched it, we every single year do a 5-year plan, and that 5-year plan is really only good for a year. And we need more stability as one, for you as a funding body, and 2, us as a school district. We need more stability than just to say, here is what we need. Yes, our needs may change, but we should be able to have an overall vision over the next 10 years of where are we going to need buildings, where are we going to need schools, and where are we going to need rezoning opportunities. So that just gives you an overview. I'm open for questions. Trey is with his family, his parents this evening. Otherwise, he would be here as well. But anything that I may not know, I can get the answer to first thing tomorrow, and then I'll shoot you an email of what his response was.
Mr. Phillips.
Bond market,
Yep.
are we okay with this schedule as it relates to what we have scheduled for the bond market?
It looks like it would be tight, but yes, because if their bid opening would have to go to their board. So the ones that are opening, the one opening February 16th for Oakland, but time it made it up here would be probably April. That is getting very tight to fit that into the bond market, because we really don't want to go in June, right around the close of the year if we don't have to. I am monitoring rates. Murray County just issued, they're a AA2. They just issued a 20-year bond, 3.91 was the interest rate. And just to kind of put that in perspective, our last school bond was 1.9, 1.6, somewhere in that range. But I am trying to monitor that, but that would be pretty tight time it came to the board through this committee and to commission for that last one in February.
I have a question, please.
Yes, ma'am.
And as you stated, Dr. Sullivan, several of us are new to this, and so we're learning. But when I look at the data, when you talk about enrollment, I'm curious about what type of rubric was used to determine these schools that are on this list and the expansion.
Yeah. So in looking at that, this was a discussion that started last January. Of course, myself, many of you, our current school board wasn't necessarily elected at that point, but at that time they were asked to rank our 5 high schools, and this was the ranking that came back at that time. I believe it was Riverdale was 1. I don't remember if Smyrna or Oakland was 2, 3, and then I believe Laverne was 4 and Blackman was 5. And looking at our enrollment, I think you're spot on. We have enrollment and capacity needs lots of places. And so to think that 3 additions would ever solve any of our problems, unfortunately, they're not.
So you're not aware of the rubric or how they came to these 3 as it relates to all of them?
Voted.
We don't have that
Yeah.
information.
Everyone voted what their preferences were based on. We had
There was no
several
science.
special.
All right, thank you.
I believe Mr. Trey Lee did make some attempt. That Trey, I think that there is some scale and scope, a rubric of some sort that the director of the physical plant provided to the school board. And I don't know if they rank their votes simply based on that rubric, but I think there's a rubric that we could get our eyes on.
And then the other part of that is we went through multiple iterations of this. It went from a conversation, we are where we are today because this took a very long time, and had a lot of different moving parts involved with it along with an election. So when I look at it, I know the one that kind of sticks out is we talk about safety a lot, is that we look at some of our schools and you look at Riverdale and Oakland. Oakland has capacity right now, and I know that's the one that gets brought up a lot. With the current building plan the way it is in 3 additions, we would have to rezone students from other areas to be able to fill that. I mean, that just makes good practical sense. You don't build an addition to a school that already has open seats to help with safety if you don't rezone students around to be able to move. And that's internal discussions that we have to have as a school district. It's not necessarily county commission involved because we control zoning, but that has to occur.
And in addition to those 3, we now have Stewart's Creek Elementary and Blackman Elementary. Their need for additions has risen based on the current enrollment numbers. So I'm sure the school board's going to really scrutinize that and bring new thoughts to us. So we will continue to get to see that and scrutinize and ask questions.
I think the problem is since this was voted on originally, we've still continued to grow and we haven't built another building. So we've still added 12 to 1,400 kids while we're, from last January to now, of the kids are still coming and we're still here. And that's nobody's fault. It's just part of the situation and why we are where we are with needing to add portables. We have to have places for kids to learn. I like Siegel Middle School's usage. They call them the cottages. They've had them for many years. I may start when I bring a bid to you, say that the cottages, maybe that sounds a little better, but they are what they are.
So Dr. Sullivan, so the November 8th special meeting is really a general discussion of throwing everything out from portables to what are the new needs that have suddenly happened, and you're going to have a discussion about everything to see just where we're at, where we think we need to go with new information. That sounds like a very important meeting.
And our entire board, so you guys kind of got to hear this, not the way I would normally do it in process, Ms. Sharp and I just kind of discussed what open dates do we have between now and then. We are, and so we will, as soon as we get back, we have 2 special call meetings that we are going to send out to our board this afternoon. So board members that are watching, I apologize, you guys don't know that's not the way we normally should operate. But we are moving as fast as we can, and our November, just like yours, is jam-packed. We are held up by, we have a Tennessee School Board Association convention that is November 10th, 11th, and 12th, which kind of knocks out some of our time. We already have other scheduled meetings, and then with the different county meetings, there's not a lot of days available. And so that's pretty much, unfortunately, one of like 2 dates we could choose for the entire month of November.
And that meeting is at 5 p.m.?
It'll probably be 5:30, I would imagine. That's right, you were correct. We have a policy meeting first, so it'll be immediately following that, so I would imagine we will probably set that for 6 or 6:30.
You said that's the 8th,
November 8th.
Election Day?
Even better, because what else can you say to that other than, yeah, there's another one.
Mr. Gooch.
Okay, just going back to TISA, am I pronouncing it correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they
Okay,
change it every time, so
TISA.
love it.
So has it been determined yet how this will affect or change local funding?
Yeah, local will not increase. Your maintenance of effort doesn't decrease or increase. It stays the same.
Same?
Yes.
Or a little bit lower?
Yeah, so we should still have to meet maintenance of effort, correct, Michael?
So they are holding harmless districts for the local match for 4 or 5 years 5, is it 5? However, that does not apply to us because our MOE is higher than the local match. The TISA law, or TISA, however you want to pronounce it, did not affect or change maintenance of effort law. So that left unchanged. So as long as we meet maintenance of effort, we are good. That did not change for us. That did not impact Rutherford County.
But the growth in the local funding could be lower, or not lower, but slower to increase?
No, not necessarily. Local funding is based on all local revenues budgeted really in the GPS fund. So depending on how the revenues are set by the commission in this coming budget year, as long as we meet the minimum, and one of the ones we can't really affect is sales tax, for example. So this commission will have to decide kind of on property tax. Really, that's how you affect the MOE, really. We can't really affect the sales tax because it has to be split 50-50. But those are continuing to increase. This year, sales taxes, I think, running about 10 to 12% over last year. So, I mean, you will have options there, but we're not at risk of missing maintenance of effort. So really, TISA did not change anything for that for the county.
Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Brian, you want to say anything since I just kind of stole the show?
And so you mentioned some funding for additions that your board is going to look at funding internally, and you mentioned the potential for portables, and that's good, nothing we have to take action on tonight.
Nothing
That's
taken action on
informational,
tonight.
but we can anticipate.
Yeah, just wanted to put that out there that that's coming up for discussion at our board meeting.
Any comments, Mr. Phillips?
Just one follow-up. I had someone ask me a question about the charter school systems and when they're functional and up and running, extracurricular activities on those schools. Is it just academics, or do they have
They can do
a football team?
Yeah, they can choose to do their own. There are charter schools in Metro Nashville that have their own, and it's really what their student enrollment needs at that point. Now,
If they don't, would those students have any other option?
I don't believe so. We could have a co-op agreement. So our high school could have a co-op agreement with them. That would be a hard sell for a co-op agreement to take seats from students who are attending that school. That would be a hard sell, but theoretically, yes, there are opportunities.
I think that concludes the, no, I'm grateful. No, thank you. Don't take that wrong. That was an abundance of information, and you came through with on the short notice, put a lot together for us. I think that we have no action to take with any of these. Correct me if I'm wrong. We approved your report. We approved your budgets. Anything that needs to be motioned that I'm missing? All right. Thank you, guys. Yeah. So that concludes the agenda. We're down to other business, and I did have two items. One is just a comment that our agenda is not very robust. It's very generic. And so when Dr. Sullivan and I met this year, Rachel and I have already revised November to put some bullet points, for instance, under the school board report to give us some anticipated topics we're going to cover. So perhaps you can have questions for those topics. Now, that may become rather generic as well. It's going to be, I think, budget, enrollment, and building and maintenance. And that may be redundant, but that will give you the ability to anticipate. And if at any time any of y'all see or anybody up here sees another topic we need to get on, reach out to me, Phil, or Rachel, and we can add that bullet, or we can get that question out to the Health Department or the Board of Education. So, and I think we will also, with the Health Department, we'll do the same. We'll have Mr. Crumby, if he's got a couple of bullets, what is going to be his order of events, and then that would likewise let y'all decide if you want to add or subtract to the agenda. So keep that in mind. And the other item I had is that there is a scheduled meeting. Our December meeting is on the 27th. I know the school board they are at work that week. I know a lot of the school board takes vacation, though, during the time when the schools are closed. So they have made themselves available, and they will be available, I'm sure. But is there any conflicts with us if we could move that meeting to December 22nd, the 20th? We could move it up one Tuesday. I'm not suggesting we have conflicts, but it did come up for discussion. Mr. Phillips.
Public safety moved last night to the 19th, I believe it was, and I think moving this one to the 20th or scheduling it would be appropriate. And if we have no business to conduct, we can always cancel it.
What about purchasing? Okay, I see. The 20th is fine with me.
Without objection, we will make that move. If we need to give you more time to consult your calendars, we can look at it next month. But if there's some confidence that we can make December 20th move, we can go ahead and lock that in and let the public know and let the school board folks know. So without objection, Mr. Gooch?
I mean, are you looking for a motion to change our meeting date, or it's just an agreement?
I just want to...
Okay.
And I'm making sure, I'm just seeing some folks consulting their calendars, and I'm just trying not to, I'm trying to, with some mannerliness, wait a minute. Is there, if without a, go ahead, right? Hope.
I was going to say that is football bowl season, so it's possible I may be traveling.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so that could get ugly.
But, Mr. Chairman, I think that seeing that the school board got to go on a retreat, I would think that you could plan for us a retreat,
Perhaps
all
in
expense
Knoxville?
paid in the spring.
Comment along those lines. I've moved into the super senior division on the golf course, and I just wonder if that's special funding maybe that I could get.
I'm going to call us back to order. Without objection, I'm seeing enough positive comments to suggest that we will move our December meeting to Tuesday, December 20th at 6 p.m. And that's the last item I have on my agenda. If I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved. Meeting adjourned.